She was a beautiful young woman with everything going for her.
She was like a ray of sunshine.
She just had this aura.
People were just naturally drawn to her.
Until one day, the unthinkable happened.
No one had heard from her since the night before.
It was so unlike her.
What happened to her and where did she go?
A desperate search unfolds.
They began knocking on doors, passing out flyers.
That's all you can think about, is finding her.
They're almost giving up. But then there's a glimmer of hope.
The family receives a text that says he's holding me in his basement.
I texted her back, dial 911.
Will rescue come in time, or is it already too late?
The story became more appalling.
It was just pure evil.
The question is why?
December 4th, 2009, Medford, New York. It's a peaceful Friday morning in this Long Island suburb, an hour east of Manhattan.
The reputation that Long Island has, it's where families live. They get away from the hustle and bustle of the city. They can come home and the kids are playing in the driveway.
It's just a quiet neighborhood, quiet area. Not too much going on.
Local nurse Barbara Ross is finishing a grueling night shift at the hospital when her husband calls.
Hey, honey.
The first sign that something was wrong was that she called me at work.
Hey, have you heard from Becky?
Barbara's husband tells her that he's received a call about her daughter, 24-year-old Becky Coster.
She didn't show up for her job, and she didn't call in to her job. But she was a pretty responsible employee.
What?
That was very out of character for Becky to not show up for work and not to tell her boss that she wasn't coming in.
Barbara's husband also says that Becky, who still lives with them, was not there this morning as he left for work.
I haven't seen her.
Are you sure? Did she come home?
I'm not sure. I didn't hear her come in.
She told me she was going out, who she was going out with, and as far as I knew, they were having a great time.
Could there be a simple explanation?
I thought maybe she had a little too much to drink and went to a friend's house.
Maybe she was just hungover. And, she overslept.
Just like everybody else, she enjoyed her time out.
I'll try to give her a call. I'll call you back.
Okay, love you.
Love you too.
After several attempts to reach Becky, her mother starts to worry.
I left several messages, and it was odd because Becky always answers her cell phone.
This is Becky. I'm not available right now, but if you leave your name and number, I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
Honey, call me as soon as you get this.
She wasn't returning her text messages. She wasn't picking up her phone. She wasn't calling her.
Something just didn't feel right.
A mother's intuition is never wrong, but no one could have predicted how the search for Rebecca Coster would unfold. 24-year-old Becky Coster had a gift for making other people happy.
Becky was always cheerful. You weren't allowed to have a bad day if Becky was around.
Everybody had to be happy. Everybody had to have a good time. There's really no argument or bitterness around Becky.
She was gonna make you smile. She was like a ray of sunshine walking into the room.
It turned out to be a marketable skill that landed her a job as a caregiver.
She was a nursing assistant. She just liked working with people.
She worked with the handicapped. She helped so many other people in the world, and she had a great impact.
She loved helping others, whether they were young, whether they were old. In whatever aspect that she could, she was that kind-hearted person that cared for all.
Caring for others was something she'd learned firsthand from her family.
My family's a very loving family. We're always there for one another.
We were all together and just laughed. A lot of laughter. And sat down, had dinner every night, watched movies.
Becky was especially close to her mother.
Becky could talk to her mother about anything and confide in her, and they had a bond that was phenomenal.
There wasn't a day that would go by that we didn't speak. When she had moved out for a short time, got her own place, we still spoke every day.
Even after moving back into her mother's house, Becky was no homebody. In addition to a solid family foundation, Becky also maintained a healthy social life.
She had a very tight-knit group of friends that she was close with. They would go to the bars.
She loved to go out dancing. That was one of her favorite things.
And whenever she went out, there were always plenty of men vying for her attention.
Becky was absolutely gorgeous.
She had a bright, beautiful smile.
She just really lit up a room. She would go to a bar and all heads would turn to Becky. She would walk in, she'd sit down, take off her jacket, and the drinks would just magically appear.
Becky had recently broken up with a long-term boyfriend named Jordan Kelly.
The relationship was very serious. They had lived together. They had talked marriage. But things just didn't work out.
They were young. Things happened. That relationship took a turn, and they decided to part ways and do their separate thing.
She definitely wanted to get married one day. We talked about, when we would go and pick out her dress and stuff.
Rebecca's love life was flourishing too when she began dating 28-year-old Thomas Harrod.
Hi.
Hey.
Thomas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Becky.
Becky.
They met through mutual friends at a party.
He seemed like a decent guy. They seemed to get along together well. He seemed like he sincerely cared and was genuine to her, so she was happy.
Rebecca, however, was in no hurry to fully commit to Thomas.
She wasn't like, let's get married now, let's commit, I'm gonna be with you for the rest of my life. It wasn't anything like that. She was trying it out, see where it went.
I don't think that she really had anything solid in mind. She just kind of went where the wind would take her. She had just gotten out of a relationship, so she definitely was taking it slow. She just wanted to have fun and live her life and enjoy her life.
She had the perfect network of friends and family surrounding her, so things were good. She never had any real issues.
Until the morning of December 4th, 2009. After a night out with friends, Rebecca Coster has suddenly gone missing.
My first thoughts was, where the hell is she? Becky always answers her phone.
Becky's mother just wanted to hear from her daughter. She wanted to know that her daughter was safe.
At the end of her shift at the hospital, Barbara Ross rushes home and makes a chilling discovery.
Her pocketbook was there. She would never leave without her pocketbook.
Becky did, in fact, come home that night after being out with her friends.
Becky had been to the house. She had been home at some point, but now she was gone.
In early December 2009, 24-year-old Long Island nurse's aide Becky Coster has gone missing after a night out with friends.
Everyone's trying to reach Becky. Calling, texting.
She wasn't returning their phone calls, which was unlike her.
We just kept saying all that morning, something just doesn't feel right. It's just not right.
The fact that Becky had apparently come home at some point during the night and then left again only adds to the mystery.
The odd thing is that Becky's purse was on the table.
So we knew she came home. We definitely knew she came home. Just didn't know where she went after that.
Becky's cell phone wasn't in her purse, however.
Becky never leaves without her phone.
If that's the case, why hadn't she returned her mother's calls? In a panic, Barbara begins reaching out to Becky's friends.
I just started calling anybody and everybody we knew.
Becky's mother called her friend, Nicole. She knew that Becky had been out with Nicole the night before.
She was out with her boyfriend and some other friends.
But when Becky's mother reaches her, Nicole tells Barbara that she'd gone home a little after midnight and that Becky and her boyfriend, Thomas Harrod, were still at the bar when she left.
They were gonna hang out for a while, and she had went home, and that was the last that she had seen of Becky.
However, Nicole says that as far as she knows, Thomas had driven Becky home.
She received a text from Becky letting her know that she arrived home safely.
When Becky's mom calls Thomas, he essentially tells her the same thing.
Thomas said yes. He dropped her off. It was around 3:30 in the morning.
And she never came back out?
No, I dropped her off and that was it.
He drove her home and he saw her go in the house.
I said, well, if you hear from her, anything, please just tell her to call me.
We're really worried. Something just isn't right.
Okay, Miss Ross. I'll let you know if I hear from her.
But as the hours pass, neither Thomas nor any of Becky's family have heard from her.
By 6 o'clock that evening, we knew something was wrong, and we called the police and filed a missing persons report.
Police take the report, but there's little they can do, at least for now.
They were informed that because Becky is an adult, they have to wait at least 24 hours. At this particular time, it had only been 12 hours.
While waiting for the police, Becky's family also launches their own effort to find their missing loved one.
They didn't just sort of sit back and wait for things to unfold.
They're very, very concerned. So they go and get some flyers printed that has her image, making people aware that this young woman is missing and they need help trying to locate her.
The family spends much of the night posting flyers throughout Medford and the surrounding area.
We reached out to everybody that we possibly could, and we would just give stacks to, different groups. And we had a group go north, south, east, west. Hit as much area as you could, just put them up. Places that she may have frequented, just made sense to, cover as much ground as we could.
Once Becky's family gets the word out that Becky is missing, they hope Becky's phone is the key to finding her.
Her phone wasn't at the house, so we knew she had it on her, and my husband at the time had said, try the family locator.
Since Becky's phone is on their family plan, her mother and stepfather can track its location, as well as her call history.
They have the software to do it, and they actually got a ping from Becky's cell phone. It was just 12 miles west of their home.
The family rushes to the neighborhood.
We knew if we found Becky's phone, we'd find Becky.
They're knocking on all the doors in the neighborhood with the flyers that have Becky's picture, asking people if they've seen this woman in the neighborhood.
Their hopes sink as there's no sign of Becky. Now desperate, the family scours her call log for clues.
The last phone number of incoming or outgoing calls or texts was an out-of-state number. We didn't know who it was. We asked all our friends. They didn't want to have this number stored in their phone. No one had that number.
The call had come just before 4 o'clock that morning.
It was after Tom had dropped her off. So yeah, there was definitely a lot more questions as to who was the person on the other end of that phone number.
Hoping Thomas might have some idea, Becky's mom decides to go see him in person.
I went to where he was staying. I went to that house and I spoke to him.
Thomas, do you recognize this number?
No?
Thomas says he doesn't know the number, but then he says something else, something that catches Becky's mother completely off guard.
He sort of drops a bombshell on her and says, do you think she's cheating on me?
What? Why would you even ask that?
Becky's mother was surprised at the question. She was shocked.
Becky's missing.
I just wanted to punch him in the face, to be honest. How dare you be questioning who she's dating when she's missing?
At this time of worry, of concern, of trying to figure out where Becky was, Thomas takes the time to ask if her daughter was cheating on him. It was callous, it was cold, it was inappropriate.
To Rebecca Coster's mother, the question isn't just upsetting, it's also suspicious.
That really caused some red flags to go up.
The questions that he was asking definitely raised some eyebrows.
Becky's mom decides to go into his social media accounts to see, what activity is going there.
But little can prepare her for what she finds.
We were just dumbfounded.
Thomas had changed his name to Thomas the Killer.
24 hours after Becky Coster disappeared from her Long Island home, her family has begun to suspect that her boyfriend, Thomas Harrod, knows what happened to her.
His actions, his movements just started to look a little sketchy. The name change was the most startling thing.
The last person to see her alive is her boyfriend, and he's changed one of his social media accounts to Thomas the Killer.
It doesn't add up. Thomas knows more than what he's letting on.
Because he was the last person who saw her, of course, we all thought that it was him.
Becky's mom is convinced that the boyfriend might have something to do with this, and so she takes all of her concerns and she brings it to the police.
When detectives hear what Becky's family has uncovered, they share her suspicions about Thomas.
How long have they been dating?
Not too long.
Was he abusive at all?
I'm not sure, but I feel Becky would have said something if he was. But he's been acting quite strange.
That immediately caused him to be a focus of the investigation.
He was the last person with her, especially with the actions he had taken in these last few hours and the questions that he was asking.
Detectives now have a suspect in the disappearance of Becky Coster. But where was Becky? And was she in danger?
Ma'am, I promise. We'll do everything we can.
Thank you.
There are indicators that something bad has happened. The fact that she doesn't show up at her job and the fact that she's not responding to her family's phone calls when she always used to be very responsive. So the police were concerned.
Detectives turn their investigation to Becky's home.
They asked to see her room. They just wanted to know everything.
They took, all the information that they could at that time.
They looked for signs of foul play or signs of struggle.
Detectives find nothing to indicate a possible crime scene.
There's really nothing out of the ordinary in her room, nothing that appears to have happened there that would indicate that she'd been taken against her will.
After searching Becky's home, detectives' next step is to talk to her boyfriend.
Police bring Thomas in for questioning. He keeps to the same story he told Becky's mother. They went out to the bar, they had a few drinks.
At the end of the evening, he got her safely home. He walked her to her door and said goodnight to her.
He tells police, I saw her go into the house and then I went home.
That was the last time you seen or spoken to her?
Yes.
And you all didn't have a fight or anything like that?
No, we didn't have any problems.
When pressed by detectives, he denies having anything to do with Becky's disappearance.
If you didn't have any problems, then why did you think she was cheating on you?
I don't know. I didn't hurt her though, I swear.
Thomas's responses to the accusations was, I didn't do it. I would never hurt her.
However, the next thing Thomas says has detectives wondering if he's telling the truth.
He told the police, I was starting to think that she was becoming distant, and I was starting to get the feeling that we were sort of growing apart.
He was definitely more serious than she was. She wasn't sure if she was going to stay with him.
Thomas tells police that their relationship had kind of cooled off, that everything was more casual now, and possibly she was seeing someone else.
Thomas speculates that Becky may have been seeing her ex, Jordan Kelly.
She and this guy had lived together. They had been together for a long period of time.
Thomas also suggests that Becky might have hooked up with someone she met earlier that night at the bar.
She talked with other people there, as she often did. She was a very social person.
Although Thomas says that night, Becky had spent most of her time talking to one man in particular.
He tells police that when he went to the restroom, she was talking to someone else.
Thomas says he doesn't know who the man was, and that the mystery man had slipped away as he saw Thomas approaching. But detectives can't help but wonder if the incident could have something to do with Becky's disappearance.
The fact that Becky may have been speaking to another guy at the bar and perhaps may have even been cheating on Thomas, this could have been potential motive for Thomas to want to harm her.
Police already know that Thomas was jealous. That was the first thing he had asked Becky's mom, was Becky cheating on him?
Thomas the Killer. Why would you make that your profile name?
It doesn't mean anything, all right? I did not hurt Becky.
While Thomas is still a top suspect,
Okay. You're free to go.
Detectives have little choice but to let Thomas go and move on to their next lead.
The next step of the investigation is for police to go to the bar where Becky was that night.
The bar staff doesn't recall anything unusual about that night, but they do have surveillance cameras.
The business provides the police with a copy of their surveillance footage, and they look at it and they see that Becky's there with her friends.
Detectives scroll through the footage until they see what appears to be the mystery man Thomas described.
Upon Thomas leaving, as he said to go to the restroom, police do notice another man approach Becky.
They had their conversation. It wasn't a long-term thing.
Just long enough for them to exchange numbers.
They can tell by looking at the surveillance video that they've got their phones out and they exchange phone numbers.
Then, as Thomas returns, the mystery man makes a hasty retreat.
The police are starting to wonder, is this mystery guy in the surveillance video at the bar, is he the one that we should be looking at?
But who is he? Detectives ask Becky's friends and family to review the video in hopes of learning his identity.
They just asked if we knew who this person was, and we said no, don't know him. Asked all her friends, nobody knew, just came out of nowhere.
Did Thomas, in fact, see this man exchange phone numbers with Becky? And was that enough to drive Thomas to do something to Becky, to harm her in any way because of possible jealousy?
Detectives know that with each passing hour, the chances of finding Becky alive are dwindling.
Where is she? That's all you can think about, finding her. Is she okay? Is she hurt? And it was wintertime. You know, you just sit staring out the window, thinking, is my baby cold? Is she calling for me? Your mind just goes everywhere.
This is the point where Becky's mom is really realizing that her daughter may never come home again.
I was just trying to keep up a happy face. You know, Becky's gonna be fine. We're gonna find her. That's what you do. You just try to make things okay, even when they're not.
But a little before midnight on Sunday, December 6th, 2 days after Becky disappeared, Becky's mother is suddenly filled with hope.
Just when things are starting to look very bleak for the family, something extraordinary happens.
Becky's mom receives a text message from Becky's cell phone.
However, the message creates a new sense of panic.
He was holding her tied up in his basement.
It's been 2 days since 24-year-old Becky Coster disappeared, and her family has begun to lose hope.
We're still in limbo. There's no questions answered. All we could do was just be there and try to console each other and pray for the best.
But now, on December 6th, their prayers may have been answered.
Becky's mom receives a text from Becky in which Becky writes, "Thomas has me tied up in his basement."
Thomas Harrod is Becky's boyfriend, who previously claimed he dropped her off at home the night she disappeared.
Thomas is suspect number 1.
Upon receiving this text message, mom is like super excited. Oh, my baby's okay.
I texted her back, Becky, dial 911. Dial 911.
But there's no response from Becky, either text message or on calling her.
Unable to reach Becky, her mom calls the police.
Mom is calling the detective, says, "Listen, I just got this text from Becky." The family and police, they all rush in unison to Thomas's house.
All I could think of was, let's find Becky. Just wanted to find her.
Thomas meets the detectives at his door.
He told them, I don't know where she is. She's not here. I'm not hiding her.
To prove it, he gives detectives permission to search his home.
Thomas is very cooperative. He lets the officers in. They search the house from top to bottom, including the basement.
They searched his house and the surrounding area, sheds and garage.
However, there is no sign of Becky.
They're still suspicious of Thomas. They're not quite ready to think that he's not involved here.
Thomas seemed like the only plausible suspect because he was the last one with her.
Becky's family continues searching around Thomas's house.
He lived in a wooded area, so we had quite a few people walking around calling Becky's name.
They also mount their own undercover surveillance of Thomas.
We would have a car, just sit around in the corner and report. See if we saw anything, any action from his house, any lights go on. If he got in his car or somebody picked him up and they went to a location, maybe that was the location that they were holding her.
The surveillance is as disappointing as the search of the house.
His daily routine seemed to be his daily routine.
Becky's family once again tries the phone's built-in locator app.
It pings at a location farther from where she was before.
And they went to where the phone seemed to be, but there was no sign of her there.
As Becky's location changes, her mother is still receiving text messages from Becky's phone.
There is another text message from Becky's phone saying, "I'm still with Thomas, he still has me." The family is able to track the location to a particular area in Long Island.
We would go wherever it would ping. We drove there. We would scream her name.
They're searching and searching, and they're asking people, but again, no sign of Becky.
While the family is chasing Becky's cell phone, detectives turn back to Becky's phone records.
They're obviously interested in the last numbers that had contact with her phone.
Most are family or friends, but one number stands out.
It was a number that was unknown to the police and unknown to her family.
That was the only odd number on Becky's list on her phone. So they were concentrating on that, trying to find out where that number came from.
They tracked the number to a man whose name is Evans Ganthier.
He's a Haitian immigrant. He was employed, he worked, he seemed like a regular guy.
Could he be the mystery man on the bar's security video?
Her family had never heard of Evans Ganthier, and none of her friends had ever heard of him either.
Once detectives identify Evans Ganthier as a person of interest, they bring him in for questioning.
They talked to him about where he was that night, what he was doing, what his interaction with Rebecca Coster was.
Evans did admit to police that, yeah, I did speak with her in the bar that night.
Yes, that's him on the surveillance video.
Although, according to Evans, there was nothing sinister about their interaction.
Look, we talked, we had a great conversation, and her boyfriend came back, and that's it.
Did you get her phone number?
Yeah.
Evans just said, yeah, you know, she was a beautiful woman. I wanted to talk to her, and I wanted to meet her.
He said that he picks up women all the time. He says that he was pretty successful at it.
Evans says that at first, he thought that night was no exception.
Evans just said, yeah, we talked for a little bit. We even exchanged phone numbers. I said, hey, you know, I want to meet with you. I want to talk with you. And she was like, you know, I've got a boyfriend. You know, I'm in a relationship. I really shouldn't even be giving you my phone number.
Despite Becky's reluctance, Evans admits that he'd made his move later that same morning, just as the phone records revealed.
Evans told police, I called her and said, hey, you know, let's meet.
But according to Evans, Becky had shot him down.
She wasn't interested.
And that set you off?
No. There's plenty of fish in the sea.
Becky simply said she had a boyfriend. It was a mistake to exchange numbers, and that was that. They hung up, and he never had heard from Becky again.
After taking his statement, detectives have Evans give them fingerprints and a DNA sample, and then they let him go.
At this point, the police aren't quite sure what they've got.
They don't know if Evans is lying. They don't know if Thomas actually knew about Evans and got upset. They just don't know.
The answers are out there, however. On December 9th, the Long Island detectives get what could be a crucial tip from police in North Stonington, Connecticut.
In a case that has had so many twists and turns so far, the most shocking is yet to come.
There was a body found in Connecticut across the Long Island Sound.
As the police in Connecticut are trying to identify this person, they come across Becky's missing persons report, and they think this may be a match.
Family, friends, and police in Suffolk County, New York have spent the last 5 days searching for Becky Coster, a Long Island nurse's assistant who disappeared early on the morning of December 4th, 2009.
We put up flyers everywhere. We hung them wherever we searched. Everybody came out of the woodwork to help us.
However, even as Becky's friends and family searched, the police across the Long Island Sound have been trying to solve a mystery of their own. It was early on the morning of December 4th, the same day Becky disappeared, that a man spotted something unusual outside the small rural town of North Stonington, Connecticut.
As he got closer, he realized it seemed to be a body that was burned. So he stopped, called the police and the fire department.
Police in Connecticut had received word that there was a brush fire.
But when they arrive, police discover that this is no ordinary brush fire.
They find that it's actually human remains that had been set ablaze.
The victim was a young woman.
The fire burned her pretty bad. She had been soaked in gasoline. Her body was face up, so the front of her body, especially her torso and face, were pretty charred.
But that wasn't the most horrific injury the young woman suffered.
She had been mutilated as well. Her fingertips were missing. Places that appeared to have had tattoos had been cut out of her skin. So she was in pretty bad shape.
When the police see that the body has been mutilated in this way, they realize that it was an effort by the killer to prevent identification of the body.
The autopsy reveals how the young woman died.
The medical examiner said that the cause of death was stab wounds to the neck.
But who was she? Connecticut detectives search their database for missing persons and come across a potential match.
You take a look at this.
They come across one in the region that kind of fits the description of the Jane Doe that was found. And that person was Becky Coster.
Coordinating with Long Island police, Connecticut investigators are able to obtain Becky's dental records and confirm the woman's identity.
There is a match, and so they now know for sure that Becky has been found.
Once the body is identified, Long Island detectives deliver the crushing news that Becky is dead.
The detectives came to the house and they spoke with Barbara and her husband.
They asked me to sit down, and I just kept asking, "It's bad news, isn't it? You found her, and it's bad news." They said, "Please just sit down." So I sat down, and they said, "Yes, we found her. It's going to be deemed a homicide." I just jumped up. I didn't want to hear another word. I couldn't listen to another word. Just don't say that. Don't say it. If somebody killed my baby.
We were all emotionally overwhelmed when we first heard the news. But as we were able to compose ourselves and start talking, we were able to say that those messages she didn't send.
When we were getting the text messages, we legitimately thought that it was Becky.
Now that they know the timeline in which Becky was killed, they immediately can deduce that the text messages didn't come from Becky.
We received those messages and she was already gone.
Who would be so cruel? Detectives believe the answer lies with Becky's cell phone.
Whoever killed Becky is still in possession of her cell phone.
The person responsible for Becky's death was the one actually sending these text messages to them saying that she's still alive.
How could someone torment and give hope and misguide us?
It was cold, it was calculating, and her killer seemed to almost be having fun.
For detectives, the timing and content of the text messages suggests that Becky's boyfriend, Thomas Herod, isn't responsible.
Why would he send a text message to Becky's mom that seems to implicate him as holding her hostage in the basement of his house?
Becky's killer was obviously trying to set Thomas up.
So he was no longer a suspect. I felt bad. I still feel bad. We came after him really hard, as any parent would. And to this day, I regret that. But when you're looking for your child, anybody, gets in your way is gonna get run down. And when I saw that he changed his name to the killer, I was like, what an idiot. Because if you're innocent, you just made yourself look guilty. Maybe he thought it would be funny. I don't know, but it was really genuinely stupid.
With Thomas essentially ruled out, detectives focus in on their remaining suspect, Evans Ganthier. the man who'd hit on Becky at the bar on the night she disappeared. And detectives believe they have evidence that could connect him to the crime.
The killer has made one mistake. The body had been wrapped in a plastic wrap and a blanket and sealed with duct tape before it had been set on fire.
The crime scene investigators were able to lift a partial fingerprint from a burned piece of duct tape.
So now they need to compare that to Evan Ganthier's fingerprints.
After police in Connecticut found Rebecca Coster's burned and mutilated body dumped beside a rural road, detectives on Long Island are investigating her murder. And they've just made what appears to be a major breakthrough.
Becky's killer has left a partial fingerprint on a piece of the burnt duct tape.
It was a good fingerprint that would be suitable for comparison.
But will it lead police to her killer?
When the police compared the fingerprints to Evan Ganthier's fingerprints, it's a match.
Within hours, detectives take the 37-year-old Haitian immigrant into custody.
When his fingerprints were a match, they went back and arrested him.
Detectives also search Evan's house and his car.
They searched his home. There was no blood, there was no sign of a struggle or violence, although they did find in his garage, on the garage floor, that it had signs that it had been cleaned pretty thoroughly.
But Evan's car hasn't been cleaned.
When they searched the car, they actually found a pool of blood under the passenger seat, and they also found some bloodstains in the luggage compartment in the back.
They are convinced they have their killer.
Hoping for a confession, detectives sit down with Evans and confront him with what they found.
We have your prints on the tape that you used to wrap her up. You need to tell us what happened.
It's not how it looks.
Evans sticks to his story, how they met at the bar, they exchanged phone numbers.
Earlier, Evans claimed he'd called Becky that morning, only to be shot down. But now, under pressure from detectives, his story starts to change.
He admits, okay, yes, we did hang out that night.
Evans tells police he goes to her house, he picks her up, and she's in the car, and they're just driving around.
Evans admits they'd eventually ended up back at his house, but he swears that her death was an accident.
He tells police that as she is walking through his garage, she trips over some dumbbells, falls, and hits her head.
She fell, and I just panicked.
He claims that he had nothing to do with her dying, that she started gagging and choking, perhaps because she was drunk or whatever.
However, while Evans denies killing Becky, he does admit to getting rid of her body.
He just decided to roll her in plastic and a blanket and then go and dispose of her.
He claimed he did all this out of panic and hoped nobody ever connected her to him.
He's worried that he's going to be blamed for being responsible for her death.
But he denied all along that he had killed her.
The detectives don't buy a word of it.
After listening to this story that Evans is weaving, the police, they're thinking, you know what, this guy's lying.
If this really was an accident, why didn't he just call 911? Why didn't he immediately call police and tell them what happened?
Even if you accept at face value that she died accidentally, what kind of person reacts by taking the body to another state and mutilating it and setting it on fire?
Plus, detectives already know that Becky's death was no accident.
The autopsy in Connecticut found evidence that she had been stabbed.
There was no trauma to her head.
Police knew that Evans Ganthier was Becky Coster's killer.
They finally found the demon that did it.
But while Becky's family rejoices that the killer has been caught, his identity comes as a complete surprise.
When the detectives told us who they arrested, we had not a clue as to who this person was.
None of her friends had ever met or knew anyone with that name.
When he goes on trial for murder in August of 2013, the prosecution contends that there's no reasonable doubt that Evans was Becky's killer.
They had so much irrefutable evidence.
The fingerprint on the duct tape the pool of Becky's blood in the car that Ganthier was using, the surveillance video at the bar showing them meeting.
However, exactly how Becky died remains shrouded in mystery.
Police aren't exactly sure what happened, but somehow Evans was able to convince Becky to come out of her house and to go for a ride with him.
Nobody knows what he said to make her come out of her house.
According to the prosecution, it was no secret what Evans had in mind when he lured Becky into his car.
He wanted to have sex with her.
Evans wanted Becky from the moment he saw her at that bar. He was determined to have her.
He liked to go to bars and pick up women. And he says they like to jump in his car and have a good time with him.
However, prosecutors believe Becky had ultimately rejected Evans' advances.
Stop.
She said no.
Get away from me.
Prosecution believed that he reacted angrily and violently when she told him that he couldn't have what he wanted.
The thought of a woman not wanting him, rejecting him, it set him off.
He wasn't going to take no for an answer, and I killed her for it.
Then, once Evans had stabbed her, he'd driven Becky to his house and mutilated her body in his garage.
He removes some of her body parts. He also cuts off a tattoo on her back, trying to make it impossible for the authorities to identify her.
He scrubbed his garage floor because he probably made a mess on the floor with her blood.
After Evans loaded her body in his trunk, he took the ferry across the Long Island Sound and drove several miles inland to a quiet stretch of road outside of North Stonington.
Then he dumped her and set her on fire.
He really thought that he was going to get away with it.
Just to make sure, he'd used Becky's phone to cover his tracks.
The demon had been texting us.
He wanted to pin it on her boyfriend.
One thing in this case that sort of demonstrates the pure evil of Evans Ganthier is sending text messages to the family, giving them this false hope that she's alive.
When it's their turn, the defense doesn't deny the monstrous things that Evans had done.
His defense acknowledged that he mutilated the body and set her on fire.
But the defense insists that Evans never intended to harm Rebecca.
The defense contested the autopsy findings suggesting that she had been stabbed.
Evans' defense team stick with the story that he gave police, that she tripped, she fell, she hit her head on a dumbbell.
They continued to insist that it was an accidental death and that he reacted badly after that, but he did not kill her.
However, Evans' version of events doesn't match the coroner's listed cause of death, and there's no getting past the mountain of evidence.
The autopsy showed no sign of a head injury.
Evans Ganthier is convicted of second-degree murder.
He was sentenced to the maximum, which is 25 years to life.
As soon as the verdict is read, Becky's mother feels a burden has been lifted.
It was like taking a deep breath. This part is done.
The family also knows that they must remain vigilant.
When it comes up for parole, I'm gonna have to go there and tell my story, and not looking forward to that.
We shouldn't have to sit in front of a parole board. He's a sick individual. His mind just is not human. The fact that he could carry out these acts against an angel on earth, he should never see the light of day.
In the meantime, the family still struggles to deal with the pain of losing Becky.
It's been like pushing a cart uphill ever since. The pain doesn't get any less. You miss her more and more every year.
And as painful as those memories are, those who loved Becky will always cherish them.
Becky was the epitome of love. Her heart was tremendous, and she extended it to all. And she lived her life every day, one of the happiest, kind souls on this planet.
I just want to see people being good to one another, just like she was. Be good to everyone. Be good to yourself. and just live every day to its fullest, like every day is your last day.